Good Monday afternoon to you. Welcome on in to the Ameren Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com, presented by Ameren, Illinois, powered by Gray Bar and driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura. I am Joe Roderick, joined alongside by Mike Claiborne, who is not at Busch Stadium, where I imagine you spent way too many hours this past weekend.
Yeah, I've done this before, but yeah, it was kind of awkward. I think the best thing they did was bang the game when they did early on Saturday, so people could get home, get a reasonable rest, or Friday night and get reasonable rest for Saturday. But we kind of got this thing worked out like a science. You do the first game. We didn't have as much of a break because it was supposed to be a day-night doubleheader, but because of the rain, it kind of pushed everything back. But it was cool. We won the series, and I think that was important. But overall, it was a long, lengthy weekend. I'm just glad I like the people I work with.
I think, that's the first time. It's probably happened before, but this is the first time I can remember where they had a set split doubleheader and the rain delay lasted so long that they were like, you know what, we're going to open the gates. Just, hey, if you were here for the first game, if you were here for the first game, you could stick around if you want. If you're coming in for the second game, sit wherever the hell you want. If you got all-inclusive seats, yeah, you still get those like as a priority, but pretty much just fill it out. We don't care.
We had this a few years, many moons ago, as a matter of fact, a similar situation. They kind of did the same thing. If I'm not mistaken, even for late in the second game, I think they left everybody got hot dogs for free because it was like the last game of a homestand, so they had nowhere else to go with all this food. So they said, just here, take it. So it was, but I think this is even before they limited beer sales.
Yeah.
So again, I'm dating myself, but it was a long time ago.
Cardinals did win 2 out of 3 games this weekend. A blowout in that first game of the Saturday doubleheader. That was nice to see. Cardinals offense just kind of exploded after everything they went through in that Houston series.
Here's what I'm learning about the Cardinals and their offense. If you look back, let's say the last week or so, and maybe even go through the course of the season, they hit really good pitching. You think about they jumped on Garrett Cole yesterday. They got some runs against Marcus Stroman in London. And if you look down the list, Valdez was another one. And Javier, they got to Javier, So, there are some guys that they really were able to do damage against. It's these guys like the bullpen game or the lesser known individual that they struggle with. But overall, the offense has never been the problem this year, okay? There may be some guys who aren't hitting as well as you like for them to, but the offense has not been as much of a glaring eyesore as the pitching has been because the pitching has been inconsistent. But, like you said, they won some games they needed to win. I think you and I talked about this last week. In the final 13 games of this before the All-Star break, I thought they had to go 9-4, 10-3. So basically, they're going to have to run the table on this road trip because they've given away a couple of games at home. But, this is, I think, to me, Joe, I think this is the most crucial time of the year for them. We saw what Flag Day brought us. We see what the July 4th brought us, and it's basically the same thing. Pitching slightly better. Okay, you've established that you have a closer. You got a couple other guys in the bullpen have kind of stepped up, but your starters, Montgomery's been good. Flaherty was good the other day, so maybe there's some mojo there, but there's still some holes in the bullpen and still some questions in your starting rotation. So, but I think this is a very important week for the Cardinals.
You have a 4-game series coming up against the Marlins, who just got swept by the Braves, and then the White Sox, who are really struggling this season. So hopefully you catch the Marlins at a bad part of their season.
Yeah, they're a good team though. They can pitch. You look at the 4 guys they're throwing at the Cardinals, and I think all their ERAs are under 3.5. So when you think about the fact they can pitch, we can't on a consistent basis. We're going to out-hit them. We have to out-hit them, and how you do that, well, we'll have to find out.
That's when you look at what they did this weekend. Jordan Montgomery, as you mentioned, had a really good outing. Jordan Hicks continues to be impressive in that closer role. I just, you have these 7 games coming up. You have the biggest question mark is going to come on Wednesday with Adam Wainwright.
Yes,
and
sir.
His next start. Have you talked to Adam Wainwright since his start against Houston?
No, I haven't. For a variety of reasons. One, I don't know what else to say to him, and everything he's going to say to us, I've already heard. So it's just a matter of him just going out and doing his job. And I really feel like at this point that if this thing goes awry, they're going to have a long thought process through the All-Star break on what's next for him. Now, it would be easier if you had somebody who was really better, but you don't. I know some people have mentioned the fact, well, maybe we ought to put Steven Matz back in the rotation. Have you seen Matz's numbers? They haven't been very good. Matthew Liberatore is quickly pitching his way out of the rotation. Dakota Hudson came up, gave you 3 solid innings, but if you look at his minor league stats, it wasn't very good. So I'm going to go back to something I've said from day one. The answer and the solution to improving this team is not in the organization. Okay? He's not in Memphis. He's not in Springfield. He's not anywhere in the organization as we speak. So what does that mean? You have to go out and get somebody. You might have to get 2 people, perhaps 3, to improve this ball club, not only to just get out of the hole that they're in, but to get into postseason play and do something. I don't think getting into postseason and losing the first round is going to be rewarding to anybody, other than those who say, well, look where they came from. Well, the reason why they came from there is because they put themselves there with a lack of personnel.
When it comes to the Adam Wainwright situation right now, are you surprised that he is still scheduled to make this next start?
No. I think that because he's earned that right to try and fight through this for the first half of the season, I'm going to give him a shot. Because again, there's nobody sitting there waiting to take his job.
And that's, even
that's Jake Woodford. Jake Woodford, who has pitched better, he's hurt. And if you're thinking about McGreevy, that means somebody comes off the 40-man, and that's easy to do. Okay, there's about 3 or 4 guys that can come off the 40-man, and I don't think anybody would lose any sleep or even notice. So it's not a situation where we're jettisoning some promising prospect. That's not the case.
Yeah, I look at it and I was, at first I was surprised, but as you mentioned, there's nobody else sitting there that could come and take that place. You and I talked last week about Dakota Hudson, and he did come up and he pitched well in the game on Saturday, but sent right back down to Memphis. He was just added as the 27th guy for the doubleheader.
And that's only because you have to.
Yeah. And with having the 4-game series against the Marlins and the 3 against the White Sox, you don't have a day off. You can't even do anything to mess with your rotation before the All-Star break. But I had thought initially when he was walking off the field on Thursday, I thought, we'll probably see him again after the All-Star break.
You may see him before the All-Star break.
And right now he's starting. Wainwright's set to start on Wednesday.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Hudson.
No, that's what I was talking about. Was with Wainwright when he was walking off the field in the second inning on Thursday. I kind of looked at that and I was like, I don't think we see him again until after the break. You give him 2 weeks off and you just kind of hit the reset button and see what he has after that. But there's nobody else there to take that spot.
But you know what? It's interesting the way you phrase it. Give him 2 weeks off. I'm kind of like, okay, because, I haven't seen anything. His last few starts have been all the same. Now, except for the start in New York where he was pretty good. I don't want to take away. And I think that's another reason why he gets another shot, because of what he did in New York. So, it's something, man. There's no easy answer here. And I think that's something we have to take into account. There is no easy answer. We're going to have to try and figure this out. I know there was some discussion about putting him in the bullpen, and obviously there's some guys out there he could replace. I don't see Drew Verhagen being part of this equation. I know he's got a hip impingement, but, you can send Romero out and put Verhagen at Waino there. But then again, you'd have to find a starter. Now, the thing on Hudson, and he's been getting lit up throughout the season, okay? This isn't some small sample size. You almost wonder, does his stuff not play in the minors? Because you have more free-swinging minor league players, compared to the big leagues. And I know guys from back in the day that wouldn't go to minor leagues to have a rehab. They said, no, I want to stay here and work on pitch on the side or whatever, because those minor leaguers, they're free swingers. and they'll swing at pitches that normally big leaguers won't swing at. So you have to take that into account, the environment that he's in, or whether that's having an impact on his numbers.
Yeah, and I was wrong. Adam Wainwright set to start on Tuesday. So tomorrow, 4th of July game, Adam Wainwright will be on the mound taking on Jesus Luzardo in that game. Tonight, it is game 1, 5:40, the start time for that. Miles Michaelis on the mound against Braxton Garrett. Miles and Garrett's 5:40 local start time for that game. They were kind of all over the place this week. So 5:40 today, 12:10 tomorrow, with it being the holiday, and then 5:40 start times again before they head up to the south side to take on the White Sox. Other news around Major League Baseball: they announced the All-Star reserves yesterday after the game. We already knew that Nolan Arenado was going to start for the National League. Nolan Arenado is the only All-Star for the Cardinals. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody, given their record this season. As far as it goes, I mean, we know that list is going to change a bunch of times over the next week, so take it for what it is with some of the other names on there. Right now, 5 guys listed for the Home Run Derby, Claibs.
They can't find guys to play in that thing anymore.
Yeah. Julio Rodriguez, who's only playing in it because it's in Seattle, and he just wants to do it in front of the home crowd. Vlad Guerrero, Pete Alonso, who has won it twice, and then Mookie Betts. In the I know he hits a lot of home runs, but he doesn't strike me as a home run derby kind of guy.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that just tells you, how this home run derby has run its course. And guys would rather say, hey, I'd rather have the time off than to go out there and waste a whole day. And I think here's the other thing. A lot of guys don't fare well after participating in the home run derby. And I think
Albert
that's
last year.
Yeah, I mean, but then you've had some other guys that you didn't hear from for the rest of the year.
I think Bobby Abreu, a good example of that. You remember Bobby Abreu?
Yeah, and you know what?
It
may have turned his whole career around.
Yeah,
because he was never the same guy after that.
Right. Randy Arozarena also in it. That's what he'll be
basically
fun.
begged his way to get in it.
Yeah, he'll be fun to see in that. But you and I were talking about this last week. This is, I think, what you need out of this is to turn it into kind of like the dunk contest in the NBA. You don't need to have guys that are all-stars participating in it.
No, I agree.
Bring guys that'll hit, the top 8 farthest home run balls of the year. Bring those guys in it and see what they could do in this.
I think that's a good idea. I think the other thing I would probably do is some of these young guys with power who haven't figured it out yet. I'd get them in there. We see all these guys, for instance, a guy, I'll just roll out a name like if he was on the roster, Luken Baker, somebody who you barely know, but now you say, wait a minute, this guy's got some power. I'm going to start paying attention to him, because I think your point is a very valid one with regard to getting other players exposure that we ought to start keeping an eye on. And so I think that would be something I would certainly take a look at with regard to, what this thing is going to look like down the road.
Right now they have got to be begging Shohei Ohtani to do it again. 400. He had a 493-foot home run the other day. His numbers in June, he had to have in June. That had to be the greatest month of baseball in the history of the game for what one player did. When you look at his pitching and his hitting in the month of June,
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. What was it? 16 home. Did he end up with 16, 15 home runs? The ERA that he had. I mean, we're a few months away. I mean, we are getting close to Shohei Ohtani being a free agent. Where do you start with him in free agency?
You mean as far as the cities? Listen,
no. As far as as far as what you pay,
you probably give him the $500 million over 10.
How many? It's crazy to think that that's low.
No, not really. This will be I don't know who's doing this deal, but I think he can be very creative with this thing, where there could be even more money on the back end. But I think there's only 3 teams that have a chance at him.
Dodgers,
Giants, and the Angels.
No,
I think
Mets?
that's it. He doesn't want to play on the East Coast for a couple of reasons. Bad weather, and also the games in Japan would be on at like 8 in the morning.
Okay.
So in the Central, I know some people talk about Chicago, doesn't like Chicago because of the weather once again. So, he's not going to Colorado. He's not going to Arizona. He's definitely not coming to the Cardinals. So you have three teams. Not going to Seattle because he doesn't want to live in the shadow of Ichiro. Okay. So you have San Francisco who can afford him. You have the Dodgers who can afford him. And then you have the Angels who will find money to afford him.
We will, next week. I wonder if they'll do anything with Shohei and Ichiro this next week with the All-Star game being in Seattle. I know they had their moments during the World Baseball Classic, but I would imagine the Mariners organization is going to push to have some sort of moment between the two of them up there. Claibs Online will be up at the All-Star game next week. I'll fly out there on Sunday and be posting, and we'll be doing the show from out there next week, along with Good Nightingale. We'll set that up from the All-Star game as well with our newest colleague, Bob Nightingale of USA Today. All of that next week here on Claibs Online, brought to you by our folks at Ameren, Illinois, Graybar, and Mungenast St. Louis Acura. By the way, Mungenast St. Louis Acura right now, you go to the website stlouisacura.com, Claibs, and we've talked about it when we've been out there. Right now, you go to these car lots, not a whole lot of inventory out there on the in the parking lots, but at Mungenast St. Louis Acura, 111 new Acuras out there on the lot right now. 111. That doesn't even count all of the pre-owned cars that they have out at Mungenast as well. So many of those new MDXs, Claibs. We once did a show from inside one of those MDXs. They have the 2024 MDXs available for you as well out there on the showroom and in the lot at Mungenast St. Louis Acura.
So you're saying they have about a couple hundred cars at least out there?
Oh, easily. I mean, yeah, we're just talking about the new ones right there. I mean, if I go and you go to the website, you go to stlouisacura.com, Claibs. I just clicked on pre-owned. 214 pre-owned cars are what they have.
So they have over
on
300 cars on the lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Over 300 cars out there. And you could sit and you could sort them by the budget. You could sit them by what they have out there, because they do have more than just Acuras out there as well. So 13720 Manchester Road, or start your search at stlouisacura.com. It's Mungenast St. Louis Acura, one of the sponsors here of Claibs Online. Let's take a quick break. Let's get into some off-season talk, NBA and NHL. We will do that when we come back. And hey, by the way, for those of you affected by some of the storms that we had over the weekend, take a listen to this Ameren Illinois Minute.
When there's a big storm with lots of outages and lots of damage, does Ameren Illinois, do they reach out to other companies?
We do. We're part of what we call the Mutual Assistance Network, and that's other companies here in the Midwest that if we need assistance, we can call in resources from the generally contiguous states to Illinois. In a very big storm, there are different mutual assistance organizations across the country. And we've called in folks from as far away as Texas and Florida, Colorado, to come help out in a storm. And we do the same when hurricanes hit Florida and the Gulf Coast. So we do help each other out. We have a resource in linemen that are in limited supply, so there's only so many linemen in the U.S., and we know that we have to support each other.
Can Graybar help my electrical and datacom jobs be more productive?
Yep. Our supply chain services are designed to do just that.
Like job site services?
Yep. We deliver the products you need where and when you need them, no matter your industry.
What if I have technical questions?
Yep. Our specialists are top-notch.
Emergency support?
Yep. Even after hours.
They're a unicorn.
When you need to keep your projects productive and profitable, rely on Graybar to help you get the job done right. No unicorns required. Yep, Graybar does that.
Here it's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com. If you've missed any of the first 20 minutes of the show, you can go and podcast it or check it out on YouTube. Just search for Claibs Online and find all of our content there. As we mentioned earlier, that includes the new show, Good Nightingale, Mike Claiborne and Bob Nightingale, talking baseball each and every week. And Claibs, just last week, you and Jamal Mayer sat down and talked a little NHL following the draft.
Yeah, I had a chance to visit with Jammer, who I think should be a candidate for the vacant Blues color analyst role. And I don't know how that selection process works, but if you're thinking about somebody who has a ton of experience, 17 years in the league, Stanley Cup champion, knows the market here in St. Louis, very well respected. I like to see who they run in here that's going to have a better credentials than what Jamal Mayers has had. And by the way, he does TV in Canada on TSN, so it's not a situation where he doesn't have any experience. So I'm throwing my hat in his ring to hopefully get him out there, and maybe he'd be the next Blues color analyst.
You guys had a chance to talk about the draft after it happened, but since then, we've seen a few other moves get made around the NHL. A few familiar faces to the Blues have new homes, as Ryan O'Reilly is now a member of the Nashville Predators, and Pat Maroon just got traded the other day to the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, that was a little interesting to see Pat go to Minnesota. I guess with Ryan Reeves moving on, they wanted to have a physical presence. And that makes sense on that front. How about Ryan Reeves gets another contract at the age of 36? And I like the deal for him. It's a good setup. I mean, but there must be something going on in Toronto because everybody's trying to get the hell out of there. And there's some talk about Austin Matthews maybe not re-signing. You have to remember, Austin Matthews is not Canadian. He's from Arizona. So he doesn't have that linkage to Canada and Toronto like a lot of players do. And I think it also says a lot of Ryan O'Reilly, who's from there, decides to go somewhere else. That ought to tell you maybe Toronto's got a bigger issue in their dressing room than they have on the ice.
Did you think there was any chance that O'Reilly would make his way back here to St. Louis?
I did. I thought there was an outside chance, but I think after they acquired the center from Philadelphia, that kind of lessened the opportunity. But, Ryan O'Reilly was a tremendous captain and a tremendous player. And I've said this to you countless times. There were very few nights that Ryan O'Reilly wasn't the best player on the ice for the Blues at something, whether it was checking, whether it was faceoffs, whether it was being an assist man, and just being a character guy. I think he's been as good of a captain as the Blues have had in a long, long time, and I wish him nothing but the best of health and success in his new venture in Nashville.
Another former Blue signed last week and got a really nice deal, too. Ivan Barbashev, after winning his second Stanley Cup with the Golden Knights, re-signed there in Vegas. 5 years, $5 million per year. That's pretty good money in the NHL.
It is a lot of money in the NHL, and it'll be interesting to see what role he'll play. We saw him score over 20 goals before, but, people always relegate him to being a third line or a fourth line player. The guy has talent. So it will be something to pay attention to on how they use him in Vegas. They've lost a couple of people along the way also. So maybe he moves up or maybe he solidifies the third line. But in any event, congratulations to him. He served a great role in St. Louis, and I'm sure he'll do the same in Las Vegas for the next 5 years.
You mentioned the one move the Blues made last week. What else do you think they need to do in the offseason as it stands right now?
They really are limited. They don't have a lot of money cap-wise unless they move some players. And obviously, with Torrey Krug electing not to want to be moved, that really kind of throws a monkey wrench into their situation. I don't think they have enough as we speak. I think the defense is still a question mark. I think the goaltending is still up in the air. Even though Bennington's here, you're stuck with him. He didn't play that well last year, even though he had a bad defense in front of him. And you have a lot of unproven forwards that are looking to figure out what lane do they actually swim in. So with all that said, you might want to hope if there's a buyout somewhere from a player in another organization, that maybe you can bring him on for the minimum. But, I think that, it's a very thin free agent market right now. I mean, Vladimir Tarasenko's still sitting out there. And I was a little surprised that somebody wouldn't scoop him up. So you have to wonder, is there more baggage to Vladimir Tarasenko than we thought? with regard to the fact that, going to the Rangers, here come the Rangers, and, he kind of fizzled there. And just the way he handled things in St. Louis, which goes back to him saying, I wanted to be traded. And then when he gets to New York, he said, they never offered me a contract. Well, why would he offer you a contract if you don't want to be here? So, the messages were mixed. And he was hot and cold in New York. And, maybe they bring him back. But again, we don't know what kind of money he's asking for. I mean, he might be asking for a lot more than maybe teams are willing to spend, because every team basically is backed up to the cap. Now, the cap didn't grow as much as I think they'd hoped for it to. So you're kind of limited. And this whole no trade, no movement contract terms in your contract, it's been detrimental to the teams. The players love it, but the teams really don't have the ability to move players like they would want to.
The guy the Blues acquired, Kevin Hayes, last year played 81 games for the Flyers, 54 points on the year, and the Flyers are going to pay 50% of his contract. That seems to be the theme here with a lot of the moves the Blues have been making lately. We saw it late last year too, that they're acquiring these players that they're hoping that a change of scenery will kind of reignite their careers, and they're getting the past teams to pick up a bulk of the salary.
Well, throw in the fact that apparently John Tortorella and Hayes weren't on the same page, and they would do anything to get him out of there. Remember, you got a new general manager and a new president of hockey. I almost call him baseball operations, and Keith Jones. So, Tortorella is not the easiest guy to play for. And so he tried to basically bury the guy. So you're right. Maybe a change of scenery would do him well. He's a serviceable player. I don't know what the real expectations are of him from a goal scoring standpoint, but, you're going to be bigger in the middle. That's the one thing the Blues were a little light in last year. So we'll see how that works out.
We will talk a little NBA offseason, a big move on the horizon coming up. We'll see what transpires with that. But first, 1 minute from the Painting and Decorating Foundation.
So what made you get involved in this program? I mean, you had multiple options, I'm sure, but what made you think that this is something you wanted to do?
Well, I wasn't quite sure what kind of career path I wanted to take at the time, and I heard about the Painters Union and all the great things about it. Basically, they put you through this apprenticeship. It's a 4-year apprenticeship, and they teach you everything you need to know about the trade. So it was pretty hard for me to pass up once I heard that.
Well, I think mostly it was just knowing that, they're here to protect you, the union is, and knowing that I was going to be able to take my time to learn. It wasn't going to be one of those things where they're forced to, day one, jump right into it. And I think once I figured that out, I love the opportunity to grow, and I think that that's the best thing for a job.
Back here, it's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Ameren, Illinois, and Gray Bar, driven by Munganast St. Louis Acura. Talked a little NHL in that last segment, but we need to get into the NBA because big doings in the NBA offseason as Damian Lillard has finally requested a trade out of Portland after years of giving Portland all the opportunities to build around him and try to build a winner. It looks like he's finally had enough and he's willing to move, but he's said he only wants to play in Miami.
Well, that kind of limits things. And you make a good point. He's given that organization everything he can. And I guess he just sees on the surface they're not going to be good enough by the time he, leaves to be able to compete. So he wants to go somewhere where he can compete. Here's a concern I have about that. I mean, he's going to a team that's starting to age themselves with the Miami Heat. And when you think about all those undrafted players that they had and they were using, you have to wonder, at some point, they're going to hit the wall as well as far as skill set's concerned. So, if he wants to go there, that's fine. I think the big challenge is finding a dance partner who can accommodate that sort of cap range. I think, what is he at, $43 million? So that's a pretty high number to move, which means you're going to have to put together a multiple combination of players in order to come close to balancing that number. And, when you look at Miami's roster, you look at Miami's roster, that means they're going to have to move at least 2 players, if not 3. And now all of a sudden, you're the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah. $42.5 million is what Damian Lillard is set to made last year. And he's not young either. He's not some young superstar anymore.
A lot of miles on him.
He
Yeah,
turns
you're right.
33 in a couple weeks.
A lot of miles on him.
Yeah, he's been playing forever as well. So then when you move somebody big like that, that's just going to cause a domino effect throughout the rest of the league. But we've already kind of seen some of the big moves being made. Chris Paul to the Warriors. You see Bradley
Which I
Beal.
still don't get that one.
What is he?
He's
just
38
deep on the bench.
He's 38. He's hurt on an annual basis. Okay, so he's a good 15-foot jump shooter, good passer. I just don't see where that fits for that team because you have some guys that have to have the ball in their hands. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson for sure. Draymond doesn't need the ball to be effective. I just don't understand that one. And I think the Warriors are trying to keep the band together for one more run. I just think it's too late.
We didn't get a chance to talk about this last week. Bradley Beal to the Suns. So
And then they pick up Eric Gordon today. They're going to be interesting to watch because they may have one guard too many.
Yeah.
Although they've got to find a way to come up with a bench because we've seen Beal get hurt. We've seen Melvin Booker get hurt. We've seen some guys who have had some injury issues. Durant's been hurt. So you better have a bench, and they don't have much of one. So it's going to be something to pay attention to on how they stock this team with some funds. And Jordan Goodwin's there too. So he may have a different role compared to what we saw him have in Washington.
As you see some of the contracts coming out now and some of the news of that over today's kind of been a big day for a lot of the NBA contracts. Let's play a game of who he played for, what they do on TNT, because 2 years, $32 million for Caris LeVert. Do you know who he plays for, Claibs?
Cleveland Cavaliers.
Okay, never heard that name until today.
Most people think it's Eddie LeVert from the OJs. The group. Yeah, no, you know what? He was an integral part of that team this year. I mean, they made some real strides. He's a good player. But you know what? Here's the thing, Joe. When you look at players today and you say $10 million, $12 million, $16 million, who are these guys? Yeah. That's just the nature of the beast. I got news for you. Once this new TV deal kicks in, you're going to be really scratching your head on how they're paying these guys all this money because they have to.
Have you seen the Team USA roster was also announced today too?
I have not.
USA FIBA World Cup. Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Austin Reeves, Paolo Banchero, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, Jaren Jackson Jr., Cam Johnson, Walker Kessler, and Bobby Portis. Claibs, I don't think that's the second coming of the Dream Team.
Yeah, and the concern is there's not a lot of international experience there other than the guys they play with and against. That roster may change a bit. But, we're having a little bit of a change of the guard. I mean, LeBron's not going back and some of the other guys aren't going back. So you have to find some guys. Now, with those guys you just mentioned, they all have a lot of talent.
Yeah.
It's all very young. I would like to have seen maybe a little bit more experience there. If just nothing more than a guy who was on the most recent team to kind of give them an idea of how this works. I think it'll be interesting to see what the coaching staff looks like. So there's a lot of things that go into it. They've got time to tweak it. Jerry Coangelo's not part of it anymore. It's a new day for a lot of other people. So I'm anxious to see how that turns out.
And when you make a good point about the guys that aren't coming back, because when you look at kind of the faces of the NBA right now, it's guys that are in their mid to late 30s, or international players. So when you look at building a Team USA, you're going to get a lot of names on that list where you look at it and you go, who? Who?
Yeah.
Where, maybe I heard that name for a year in college, but I don't know who he plays for now type thing. Because Giannis, Jokic, and who's the guy with the Mavericks?
Luka Doncic.
Luka. I mean, those are all international guys. Those are all three big faces of the NBA. And then Durant's still there, LeBron's still there, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard. I mean, those are guys that they're past that. They're not doing that. They're not adding more games onto them anymore.
Well, here's another thing to think about. And you look at this year's draft. and how much of an international non-college draft we had as far as high picks, lottery picks. We didn't have the guys from Old State U and Duke and other places, not as prevalent this year. They've gone internationally, they've gone the G League, they've gone other methods. And I think the college game as we know it is going to be on notice and it's not their job to develop NBA players, okay? And it's not their job to do it, but they've really hung their hat on that, the fact that they can turn out NBA players. And they will, but they won't be or haven't been the so-called lottery guys that we've been accustomed to seeing. Now, you had the kid from Alabama. He was in that mix, but other than that, a lot of those guys, most of us haven't heard of because they have not been on a more national scene.
Let's take our final break, wrap things up when we get back. Before we do that, though, Claibs, our friends over at Fast Eddie's, a lot of people maybe taking the whole week off, head on down to Alton, Illinois, and hit up Fast Eddie's one of these days for the holiday week.
Don't know why you wouldn't. Coldest beer, peel and eat shrimp, the Fat Eddie burger, and everything else that comes with it is always a main staple in Alton, Illinois. And now they have a dispensary open right next door to it. So a lot of fun things that are going on at Fast Eddie's. And as you mentioned, Joe, some people are taking this week off. Maybe you go over there for lunch, or maybe you go over there in the evening, catch a Cardinal game. There's a lot of things to do when you swing by Fast Eddie's at the foot of the Alton Bridge in Alton, Illinois. You got to be 21 and over to go there. And I guarantee you, once you go once, you will certainly put it on your list to be there more than the next time.
Back here in just a bit, it's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe here on ClaibsOnline.com.
The Legends of Golf return to St. Louis in 2023. You won't want to miss one of the strongest fields in golf. Ernie Els, Steve Stricker, Bernard Langer, John Daly, and many more when they compete for the 2023 Ascension Charity Classic title, September 5th through the 10th at historic Norwood Hills Country Club. All proceeds benefit area charities. Together, we were able to donate over $1 million to those most in need last year. Visit AscensionCharityClassic.com.
Claibs, we talked a lot of NBA in that last segment. We did not bring up one of the things I wanted to talk about were the cuts that were made this past weekend with ESPN. A lot of big-name talent let go, and it seemed like they really cut into their NBA on ESPN coverage with some of the people that no longer have jobs there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that, we saw it coming. And I think as each season ends, that's when you'll start to see more guys get reduced. I mean, for baseball, I'm sure you'll see some cuts there. I think the biggest shock was Jeff Van Gundy was let go and Kendrick Perkins still has a job. But it's my understanding that maybe Doc Rivers takes that job as a color analyst.
Is Van Gundy looking for a job again coaching?
No, I don't think so. I think Van Gundy, if he sits tight once they do this next NBA deal, he'll be with one of these other networks because they're going to expand it. I know NBC is kicking the door on it, and CBS allegedly was, asking about it. I think NBC really would like to have it back. It was a very good gold standard for them back in the day. So there'll be an additional network or two that will cover NBA games after next year, and I'm sure Jeff Van Gundy will be part of one of those broadcasts.
Claibs, we saw something new in Chicago this weekend. I know you're a big Formula One guy. They tried to do street racing in NASCAR, and the weather did not want to cooperate with them. Add to that the poor air quality that was in Chicago this past weekend. Wasn't a great start, but from what you saw, what were your takeaways from street racing, NASCAR street racing in Chicago?
I didn't see it any different than any other time when you go to Chicago with the way they drive there on the streets, to be honest with you. So, but I think listen, NASCAR has to figure out how to remain non-stagnant. Okay. They go to the same tracks every year. And I think they want to do something a little different because as they watch Formula One and the Indy cars, they're starting to do more street events. You don't have to do a bunch of them, but if you have one on the calendar, just like when they went out to the Coliseum and raced out there, they're trying to make sure that they're not stagnant and they can go into these large markets who don't have an annual race and have an impact. They had some tweaking they probably need to do. Maybe it's a different time on the schedule. But overall, I like what they were trying to do. Obviously, the weather didn't cooperate. But at some point, you got to be more creative as far as giving these racers a chance. Now, the challenge that you have is this isn't an oval. I mean, there's a lot more turns, and you have some really tight turns. And if you don't have the right equipment for that, if your car isn't set up for it, especially the tires, then you're going to probably be out of the race fairly early. And I think in this case, there were some drivers who probably didn't get enough track time, because it's not like they can block off the streets for a week and you can go out and race the track. So they were kind of like sight unseen. And that's something they'll probably have to think about when they put this thing together, hopefully next year.
Claibs, that's going to do it for our show today. As people could see, you are at your home. You are not down in Miami with the Cardinals. So what's on the agenda for this week?
Well, we'll visit with a walk in the fairway with Nick Ragone on Thursday. We'll also talk to Bob Nightingale, good Nightingale, as we go into the All-Star break. And other than that, I've got some other projects I'll be working on. So I'll be busy enough.
All right, Claibs, next time you and I talk, I'll be up in Seattle before the home run derby next week, seeing whatever coverage I can provide for that. I have found, you know what, it's a short trip, but it's a lot of fun to go up there and some people you see just once a year and kind of just taken in the All-Star game. It's become it's fastly become an enjoyable experience, a big event that I've been going to now the last 4 years. So we'll see what we can get for the folks, the viewers of Claibs Online next week in Seattle. For Mike Claiborne, I am Joe Roderick. This has been another edition of the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show, powered by Ameren, Illinois and Gray Bar, and driven by Mungenast St. Louis Acura, Mungenast Burkhardt, Alton Toyota. We're always right here on ClaibsOnline.com.
The 1-1 pitch. A swing, and there it goes! Left field! Way back! That's home run number 700!
Albert hits it down the left field line. Number 703! 703! It's history!